in El Show Sin Fronteras, where we discussed and unpacked the news of the week related to immigration. There's so many headlines, and I want to get with you guys and help you interpret what's happening, figure out, what this means, what the future holds. It's really hard to keep up with all of the headlines on immigration. There's something new rolling out every week. So the purpose of this show is to talk to you guys about what I'm seeing on a weekly basis. And I'm also here live to answer your questions. I'm very available for conversations around the issues, the political issues and discussions around that. I think that there can be really healthy debate and conversation around immigration. There was an op-ed that came out just on the New York Times today. I forget the author's name, forgive me. But his point was that although the American people are unhappy with Trump's enforcement of immigration and the way that that's going, they are similarly not ready to hand immigration back to the Democrats because the Democrats have not shown the American public that they can be trusted to enforce immigration. And there's a lot about that op-ed that I don't agree with, specifically the stuff about asylum seekers and how asylum seekers should be treated. I think that there's this theory for people who haven't been working with asylum seekers at the border for the last 2 decades that, oh, it's just as simple as you come in illegally and then you don't qualify for asylum. And then if you do come in, you need to be vetted quickly and detained during that period of time. I don't totally agree with that. I mean, what we had before Trump 1.0 was a functioning system of vetting asylum seekers. There were abuses and problems, and there were always things to be fixed, but it was fundamentally a functioning screening mechanism for asylum seekers. And all of that was dismantled during Trump 1.0 with like the migrant protection protocols and Title 42 and closure of the border. So I do think that there's this, sort of fundamental misunderstanding about what happens at the border and how we should treat asylum seekers. But I think that anytime there's confusion, that is a failure of leadership to talk about it. And the Biden administration didn't really talk a lot about immigration. Trump, they allowed, Trump and the sort of far right to define immigration and to tell everybody that there was this invasion and this problem that immigrants were drug traffickers, et cetera. And the balance of the conversation did not occur. So this is like a meandering way for me to say, let's talk about this stuff. If you have thoughts or questions, I really do want to have those conversations because I think that, moral, well-meaning, ethical, humanitarian-minded people remain somewhat confused about what the solution is on immigration. And so, of course, we need border enforcement and we need borders and we need laws and we need safety for the American people. And also, we need immigration and kindness. And how does all of that happen from a policy perspective? And I think acknowledging that it's not just black and white or super clear is really important on the part of leadership. So anyway, that's part of what we're doing here in these shows is having those conversations. And I'm going to get to the news of the week. I'm going to answer your questions and your comments. And then we're going to end with an action tip because that's another thing that I know a lot of people really want right now is to feel like you're doing something other than calling your legislators, and going to protests. What else can we be doing? So that's another reason that we're here is providing you ways to be involved that are just little easy ways that you can work into a busy life. It's a lot living a life with a job and raising kids and like keeping everybody in healthy and happy. And then adding civic engagement into that is a lot for most people. And so how can we do that in a way that actually functions well for us in our lives? That's another part of this conversation. So before I get to the news, just a reminder, Lincoln-Goldfinch Law, my law firm, is an immigration firm. We only do immigration. We represent immigrant families and we do detained cases. We take cases all over the 50 United States. Immigration law is federal. We are a virtual firm. We can help you regardless of where you are around the globe. So if you or someone you know needs immigration advice, please just reach out to us. We are still doing free consultations. They're completely free, and it is one of the best ways that someone who is facing immigration threats, if you're worried, one of the best things you can do is educate and inform yourself. And the best way to do that is to get an individualized, confidential consultation with an immigration lawyer. So that's what we're offering to people literally all over the globe. We have virtual consultations available. Please don't hesitate to reach out. That's my number one tip for people, is that you get immigration advice for you. Okay, I see your questions coming in, Rebecca. Thank you. I'm going to get to the news and then we'll talk about DACA. All right, so some of you may have heard over the weekend, what's today, Tuesday, there was a whole hullabaloo because I think it was the 19th. It was before the weekend. The Trump administration announced a new $100,000 fee per applicant for the H-1B visa. What is the H-1B visa? It is the most common professional work visa that we have in the United States. So we have this, it's H-1B, it's 85,000 people per year can get the visa. It lasts for 3 years. So we have several 100,000 people in the United States on H-1B visas. Between India and China, that's almost 90% of the people who hold visas. There's 70% people from India, 12% people from China. These are professional level visas. These are people who are, engineers working in tech, a lot of innovation, a lot of STEM, high level professionals work under the H-1B visa. And there's a lottery every year. So in a very sloppy rollout, Trump administration just issued a memo saying $100,000 fine applies to anybody who's outside of the country. That created mass chaos and panic there were literally flights of people were scrambling to get off the plane when this news broke because they thought they weren't going to be able to come back without paying a $100,000 fine. I mean, just imagine the chaos of that. Not to mention all of the employers, many of whom are small businesses. These are not just tech giants that employ H-1B visa holders. Did not know how this was going to apply to them. It was just, mass panic. Well, the Trump administration tried to rectify the situation by Sunday, and they issued another news update saying, oh, no, this fine only applies to people who apply in the next lottery in 2026. So the fine does not apply to anyone who's already got an H-1B or has already been selected for 2025 for the H-1B. So that's good news, but we still have the $100,000 fine weighing over our heads, which there are already articles out about how Europe and China are going to take advantage of this because the United States is going to lose so many brilliant innovators as a result of this move, that Europe and China are already capitalizing on this loss of the United States for no reason whatsoever. It's a really bad move economically. I would not be surprised at all if this plays out just like a lot of the tariffs have, right? That this is just some sort of threat that gets tossed out. There's backlash from the business community, and then Trump backpedals on it. I think I would not be surprised. In fact, might even put money on the fine never actually occurring. But as we all know, there is fallout from these situations. There's, diplomatic relations. Our diplomatic relations with India are very damaged by this move, and that stuff, you don't just repair it by saying, whoops, never mind. The pain is still there. The harm is still there. So this is not a good situation, even though they did clarify that people who are out of the country could travel inside the country. So that's the H-1B situation. I'll keep you guys posted about that. I want to talk now about Texas specifically. We have SB4 and what they're calling Operation Lone Star 2.0. So SB4 was a law that the Texas legislature passed in 2023, which created a state level crime for immigration violations, for illegal entry. That was blocked by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals because immigration law is federal. The state cannot create a crime for an immigration violation. The Biden administration had brought that lawsuit. So the thinking was when the Trump administration takes over and pulls its support for that lawsuit, then the law will be allowed to go forward. But there were a few other plaintiffs in that lawsuit, some legal services organizations, et cetera, 3 other orgs that kept the lawsuit going. And this summer, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the block against SB4, meaning we don't have a state level crime for immigration violations in Texas. It has been disallowed because it's unconstitutional. That remains standing. However, what we do have is the new law that was passed this year by the legislature, SB 8, which mandates cooperation from counties and sheriffs in Texas, between those sheriffs and ICE. So we are starting in 2026 going to see a slow rollout, because it has to be done by the end of the year, of every county with more than 100,000 residents beginning to cooperate. What that means is that immigrants need to understand that starting next year, sheriff's departments are going to be at some level helping to enforce immigration laws. So that increases the danger of interacting with sheriffs. I'm sorry to have to say that, because that really damages public safety overall. When immigrants, who are very large population of Texas, are afraid of law enforcement, don't want to report crimes, don't want to call the cops if they're victims of crimes, that hurts everybody. And I wish I didn't have to say that sheriffs aren't going to be safe for immigrants, but it's the truth. And then we also saw Operation Lone Star 2.0. There was a really excellent article by a guy named Alejandro Serrano from the Texas Tribune reporting on this. He did a lot of research. The Texas Department of Public Safety, right, which is the statewide law enforcement agency, was directed by Greg Abbott, the governor, to start enforcing immigration in January. Since then, they've made over 3,000 arrests for immigration, and there's a lot happening in Texas at the statewide level. So even though SB4 was blocked, we do have SB 8 mandating sheriff cooperation, and we do have the state troopers cooperating and making immigration arrests. So, I think that it's fair to say in Texas, for immigrants, when you are interacting with law enforcement, really any agency, the risk is there that that agency is cooperating with ICE at this point. I mean, there's some places where that's not true. Austin Police Department, for example, but in general, that's the way it is in Texas right now. Okay, next note is about a company, not an org, a company called Palantir. They call themselves data processing organization. And ICE has been using Palantir's information to make immigration arrests. This is what they're accessing to gain IRS data. They're using facial recognition. They are tracking people's cell phones so they can ping people and find out where they are. And it is really scary, the amount of oversight now that ICE has through data sharing in the way that they're tracking people. So they're accessing school records, tax records, DMV. People who are going to like a big sporting event should assume that your faces are being scanned and that information is shared with ICE. In terms of like, how does one live a life where all of your data isn't being shared? I'm clearly not the right person to ask about that. Like, here I am putting all my opinions out on social media on a weekly basis. But I think, if you're on a phone and you're going out in public, a lot of your information is being shared. So, and we know that social media is being watched by immigration for sure. So I think, one of the things to be thoughtful about is like, what type of information are you putting out on social media? Are you celebrating things that are non-controversial? Family celebrations, graduations, things like that. If you are starting to put controversial opinions out online, I'm not telling you not to do that. It's your right with free speech, but be aware that those are the types of things that they're starting to watch and track. And particularly if you are an immigrant in some type of immigration process, be very, very thoughtful and cautious about that. This is not really new news. I just want to touch on the parole programs for Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and TPS for Venezuela and Nicaragua. Those have all been canceled and revoked by Trump. People who are under those work permits do need to be aware that your work permits might not be what's the word I'm looking for? Viable anymore. And so employers also need to be aware of this and be checking this for I-9 compliance. Let's see, what other news do we want to touch on? And then the last thing I'll touch on, because I see your questions coming in, is the Texas Dream Act. This one, under normal circumstances, I think that this bit of news would be top of the headlines for a long period of time. This is really big deal, really impactful, really changing a lot of lives in Texas in a bad way. But because the other news is so loud, this one has gotten a little bit buried. So earlier this summer, the legislature revoked in-state tuition for Dreamers in Texas. What does that mean? That means immigrant children who have grown up in Texas and graduated from high schools here in Texas and go to public universities. So they've been successful, right? They've done really well in school and they've gotten into university. They have had their in-state tuition revoked, even though they've grown up here. And so many of these students are dropping out of school. It's really, really heartbreaking, the stories that are going on here. The courts initially allowed the cancellation of in-state tuition to occur. So the first layer of lawsuit did not go well. They for example, there was only one article in the Houston Chronicle about an appeal that's gone up, and I didn't see the Houston Chronicle has a paywall, and I don't have a subscription with them. I couldn't open the article. I found no other articles about the fact that this decision has been appealed, like not on the Associated Press, nothing. That's what I mean. It's just not getting reported on, but it is being appealed. And I also want to say there are a lot of really amazing people, including my professor, Barbara Hines, my mentor, working behind the scenes, helping students prove that they are in lawful status, because many students, although they're dreamers, they're in some type of lawful status and they still qualify for in-state tuition. But not surprisingly, a lot of these colleges and universities don't really understand the parameters, and they're getting it wrong, and they're issuing the wrong tuition to a lot of students. And so legal support is needed. So I also want to say to dreamers in Texas who you think you're in legal status or you think the school is getting it wrong, feel free to DM me and I can get you in touch with some of the people who are working on these cases pro bono. Because there's a lot of great minds working on this issue behind the scenes, even though we're not hearing about it a lot in the media. So there's your weekly roundup. I'm going to start getting to your questions. Rebecca on TikTok, when are we going to have any news about DACA? The last I heard was October. I did hear maybe the last week in September. What we're waiting on is Judge Hainan to interpret the Fifth Circuit decision saying that DACA was legal and then deciding what's going to happen to dreamers in Texas with work permits. So we're awaiting Hainan to interpret that decision. I've heard that there's some conversations going on behind the scenes with MALDEF, the lead plaintiff, on that. And then I guess it would be the state of Texas. So hopefully within the next few weeks. But when that occurs, it will be very big news. So you guys will hear about it, of course, in this show, but also when something drops on that, I'll do a video immediately. So just, if you're not already following me, you probably are if you're here, but if you're not already following me, follow me. And that's one of the best ways to get late breaking news on immigration, because wherever I am, makeup or no, pajamas or no, if there's a news that drops, I get on a video and I get it out to you guys within minutes. So you can count on me for that. If it's big news that impacts people, I'll get it to you immediately. Okay, tell it like it is on TikTok, 512. You must be in Austin. If you came in illegally, then you got a green card and then a waiver to cover the unlawful presence. Can that be taken away? No, they're not. First of all, there's no proposed memos or legislation on revoking the waiver. The unlawful presence waiver, the way that it's adjudicated, could potentially be edited by the executive branch, but there's no threats of that. No one seems to be talking about it. And certainly it would not be retroactive. They can't pull it, especially if you've already got your green card. They can't say, well, at the time that you got your green card, the program that was legal is now not in existence, and therefore retroactively we're going to revoke your green card. No, that's not the way that laws work. So I would say that you're safe if you have your green card. But for everybody who is with a green card, really do go for citizenship as soon as you can. The safest status you can have, of course, is U.S. citizenship. You can't have it taken away. You can't be deported for committing crime. In very few instances, they are going after green card holders for political speech, like Mahmoud Khalil, for example. So I would say if you are a green card holder, do go for citizenship to get yourself protected. Also, you can live anywhere in the world if you're a U.S. citizen. And so if you wanted to like retire in another country or move to another country for a little while and then come back in a few years, you can do that if you're a U.S. citizen. You cannot do that if you are a green card holder. So it's another reason to get citizenship. Plus, you can vote. Also important. Okay, commentary from Diamond Face. Yeah, I didn't talk about this, but thank you for reminding me. Tom Homan accepted $50,000 I think it was on camera in an undercover sting. You say he should be in prison for corruption. Yeah, this is another one of those things like, how are we not all talking about this? That Tom Homan was actually caught accepting a $50,000 bribe. I mean, it boggles the mind, the amount of corruption that occurs in this administration. It's so upsetting. So yes, thank you. We'll add that to the news of the week. Adolfo, how long does it take to get approved for advanced parole? Typically, that's going to be pretty quick. So advanced parole, you can get it in various types of cases. So you can get it if you have TPS, if you have DACA, or if you're applying for a green card, you can get advanced parole. I'm going to assume you're asking about DACA because that's usually the time you would do it sort of as a standalone. And those come pretty quickly, between 3 and 6 months is what I would say, is what we're seeing on those. And you can still do advanced parole. Here's why you would do advanced parole if you're a dreamer. You have your work permit, but you entered illegally. You entered without a visa, and you want to maybe marry a U.S. citizen. If you entered legally and you marry a U.S. citizen, you can adjust status to permanent resident without leaving the country, but you have to have that legal entry. So if you're a dreamer, you can get advanced parole, leave the country, come back in legally, and then adjust status based on marriage to a U.S. citizen. That advanced parole, that departure and reentry, has to be allowed by USCIS, and it has to be for a reason that is educational, for employment, or for humanitarian. So that means you're doing a work, or study abroad, or you're going abroad for a conference, or you have a very sick relative. Like, these are some of the standard reasons you would get advanced parole. You'd leave, you come back in, marry your U.S. citizen spouse, and then you could get a green card. That's probably one of the only scenarios in which I would recommend advanced parole, unless you truly have an emergency. Like if you have a parent who's, very, very ill, do advanced parole so you can go see that person, of course. But for purposes of immigration, advanced parole, in the status of dreamers is risky enough right now that I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't probably actually recommend it just for a study abroad or just for a work trip. But if you need it to obtain the legal entry to then get the green card, then it would be worth the risk, in my opinion. But we are still seeing approvals of advanced parole and people getting in. Miguel Cruz, any news on first-time DACA applicants in Texas? Not yet. We're still waiting on the DACA decision. I think they will. I mean, DACA was ruled legal, and they are accepting the applications. So I think it is, I would say, a sure thing that dreamers in Texas, initial DACA applicants, will be able to apply. The question is about work permits. And so we're just waiting on Judge Hanen's final decision on all of that before telling dreamers what to do. But I'll have thoughts for you guys about, ways that if you can't get a work permit in Texas, like, what else could you do? We'll talk through all of the what now questions once we have the decision. Maybe, can a resident husband apply for his wife? Yes, but there is a wait time. So when you are a spouse of a U.S. citizen, you are an immediate relative, and there's no line to get in, right? It's just as long as the paperwork takes. But if you are the spouse of a permanent resident, you are assigned a priority date and you have to wait your turn in line. And right now the wait time is about, for Mexican citizens who are married to permanent residents, 2 or 3 years. I haven't checked the most recent visa bulletin, but it's been hovering at around 2 to 3 years of wait time. So should you do it? Yes, go ahead and apply, but also your spouse, as soon as they're eligible for the green card, they should apply for the green card also. Okay. Aiden de Leon Romo. What if we were waved in by CBP at the border in the 80s? Whew, how would I prove that? That is a tricky one. We've had a few successes in those. There's a case called Matter of Quilantan, Quilantan, and this is a case that says that someone who can prove their legal entry, even if they don't have a visa, can still qualify. So the way that I've done this in the past is I tell the story of the entry. So like, let's say you were 9 years old and you came in the backseat of the car with your grandma. And no one, like she didn't have to show any documents for you and she was a US citizen. Well, what you would need to do is, if your grandma's not alive anymore, talk to your parents or your aunt and your uncle, anybody who remembers what happened, and you tell the story of your journey. So when I was 9, I was in 3rd grade. And when the summer started, my parents were in the United States and they decided that they wanted to finally bring me here. They had earned enough money and my grandma was the one who drove me over. And I remember that, I packed up my little pink suitcase and we rode, and I was in the back seat of the car and I fell asleep. And then I woke up when we were crossing over and I remember what they said. And then when we crossed over, she drove me to, we were in El Paso and my parents came and picked me up and we ate at the Waffle House or whatever. Like that level of specificity and detail is required. And then any evidence of it that you can obtain is also helpful. I know we're talking about 40 years ago, so it's kind of a big ask, but that's how you would do it. And then I'll also just add the caveat that this is a hard time to be winning real discretionary cases like this. So Biden and even before, like Trump 1.0, we would take these, we call them Kelantan cases. We would take these regularly. Like, oh, you don't have proof of your entry? We'll just do an affidavit and tell the story and we'll get you your green card. It's not like that anymore. Now I would say that's a pretty risky proposition. But given that you've been here since the 80s, I would like to set up a consultation with you and talk through your story of entry and what's happened since then. Because there's a lot of other things that we could maybe find for you rather than just that legal entry. When you've been here 40 years, there's usually something in your past where we can find you a way to get legal status. There's also amnesty for people who have been here since the 70s, the early 70s, but that doesn't apply yet to the 80s. So it's not technically amnesty, but well, I guess it is. Anyway, moving on, let's have a consultation. So J7 from TikTok. Do you recommend travel with advanced parole while I wait for an answer on the I-485 already done? I have the I-360 approved. I don't recommend it unless you have an emergency. Definitely not for tourism. I know you probably really want to see your family and it's been a really long time. I would wait till you get the approval. I think that it's risky enough that I wouldn't recommend it. But let's make sure your 485 is within processing times and that there are no issues. If you have an attorney, great. If you don't have an attorney or you're unhappy with your attorney, reach out to me for a second opinion consultation and we can look through like, how long has your 485 been pending? What was the basis of your case? If you've already got an I-360 approved, that's great. If it was I'm going to guess a VAWA or maybe a widow case, that 360 approval is very helpful. And then we can just make sure that there's not, any anticipated issues with the 485 and look at the processing times. Deli, we filed my VAWA case in early June. How long do you think it will take to hear news? On the overall VAWA, I would say by the end of next year, we should have an answer. Did we file? I don't know, Deli, if you were our client or not, but did you also file a 485 adjustment of status? Because if you did, then the work permit should come, by the end of this year or early next year. But the actual VAWA decision can take about 18 months. Okay, Aiden, again in TikTok. My cousin was in a deportation order. We went to her court. The judge dismissed the case. Okay, so she was in removal. She went to court. The judge dismissed her case. Could I use that as evidence? Oh, I see. About the entry. Yeah, maybe what we would need to do is look at the evidence that was submitted in her case. And if we don't have it, we can get a FOIA. Oh, I see the follow-up. Yes, I think that would be helpful evidence. Let's do a consultation and we'll go through all of that. But yeah, that sounds like a good record to have built. Yes. From maybe, does it make a difference if both husband and wife are here in the U.S.? Maybe you're with a resident husband. Yeah. So the process looks like this. If, let's say, the husband's a permanent resident, wife is undocumented, he files for her, we do the I-130, we have to wait for the priority date, and we're going to need a waiver for unlawful presence. Wife is not protected during that wait time. And under, this era of heightened enforcement, we want to talk about what we would do if wife gets picked up. Are you eligible for release on bond? What's the plan with the kids, et cetera? So I think this is a situation where, yes, we can do it. We should get started as soon as possible, because if you get picked up and then you're deported, we will have already started the process of bringing you back, which will take at least that 2 years of wait time. And we don't want to lose time. So we want to start as fast as possible. But safety planning is going to be one of the critical parts of your representation, because you're here unprotected. So we want to make sure that we've thought through what is the safety plan for the family. And then Melanie, thanks for being here with me again. If someone is deported now, do they stand a chance to get married later and come back legally? Yeah, for sure. There is a waiver for a removal order for someone who marries a U.S. citizen. You have to prove hardship to the U.S. citizen spouse if they can't bring their relative here more quickly. So that waiver is focused on the U.S. citizen, and we would look at, job, health, mental health, family needs, et cetera. But there are definitely ways to do that. And I see that I've got one final question coming in. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys the action tip of the week. If you follow me, I'm running for office in the Texas legislature, House District 50, which is the district that James Tallarico is vacating to run for U.S. Senate. If you don't follow him, do it. He's really remarkable. His interview on Joe Rogan's podcast was really, really awesome. I recommend listening to that. In any event, I'm running for his seat in HD 50. And your action tip of the week is to go visit my website, my campaign website, and sign up to volunteer. We've got, the next 5 months or so preparing for the primary in March, and we could use a lot of support. So it's klg4texas.com. And then last question on Instagram, Stefan, I'm trying to file my U visa case kind of on my own. Are there other forms that I need besides the I-918? Yeah, you probably are going to need a waiver depending upon your history. That is the form I-192, where you'll need to waive any crimes, any unlawful entries, any departures. I understand that U visas can be costly. My advice to you is not to do it pro se or on your own. The reason for that is that when you file a U visa case, you're going to be put in a line that takes 10 years, right, to get your U visa. And you may not know for years and years and years and years that something's missing on your application. You may think that everything's just fine, and then you find out that one little thing was submitted wrong and you've lost a lot of valuable time. So the U visa is one that I would not recommend doing on your own. So talk to, we do payment plans in my office. So reach out and see if there's maybe some way we could work with you on a payment plan, or call the nonprofits in your area. You can, I don't know where you live, but there's some law schools have clinics where law students represent people. They are very, very engaged and care deeply about their clients. That can be a good thing to do. Or you can go to places like Catholic Charities or American Gateways. They do sliding scale representation, and maybe you could get some help there at a lower cost. But I don't recommend doing a U visa on your own. That's a complex application, and you don't want to just miss something and then get denied and you've lost 10 years. And you could have done it right to start out from the beginning. Melanie, best of luck. Can I volunteer from New York City? Yes, you can. Yeah, please join in. We'll figure out ways, phone banking, texting, all that stuff. We will figure out ways to plug you in, Melanie. Thank you so much. All right, guys, it was great to be with you again. I've missed you. I was traveling, so I was kind of off and then I was on, but things were glitching. And so here I am back in business, back here with y'all. And I will see you on Thursday in Espanol and then next Tuesday again in English. Have a great, great rest of the week.